are listening to a free version of the Majority Report with Sam Steeder. To support the show and get another 15 minutes of daily program, go to majority.fm, please.
The Majority Report with Sam Steeder.
It is Wednesday, July 3rd, 2019. My name is Sam Steeder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America. Downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Matt Ford of the New Republic on the recently ended Supreme Court term of 2019 and what to expect in the next one. Meanwhile, Trump and Republicans dropped their bid to add the citizenship question on the census, supposedly. And congressional Dems look to the courts to uphold their right to see Donald Trump's taxes. Meanwhile, a federal judge has blocked Bill Barr's proclamation that indefinite detention is legal for immigrants. And the Department of Homeland Security Inspector General finds that conditions in the border concentration camps are squalid. Park Service will pay $2.5 million for Donald Trump's 4th of July barbecue. And as Biden drops, Warren and Harris surge. And at the other end, Hickenlooper, more like Hickenpooper. Am I right? Sorry.
No.
Sorry, I had to do
Not good.
And congratulations, folks. June was the hottest month ever recorded on the planet Earth.
Breaking records.
Oh, things are just getting better. Prosecutors will retry the volunteer who was trying to help migrants not die in the desert. And Poppy! Meghan McCain feels like a caged animal and may leave the View.
That is an appropriate term, finally. Joy Behar is like having bamboo shoots.
I mean, my father.
All this and more on today's program. Hi, folks. We're a little bit giddy around here, of course, because tomorrow is the 4th, and we're all excited for it to just downpour in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. We're hoping for thunderstorms that start early and are persistent throughout the day. Do they get northeasters there? Like, do they get that thing where it comes in and then it circles back around and dumps even more rain? Washington, D.C. needs rain. And if there's ever been a time where I'm calling for a biblical flood, I would say it's tomorrow, starting early in the morning. I want to see one of those new Abrams tanks floating down Pennsylvania Avenue. That's what I want to see.
Hashem.
There you exactly. But that's not the only reason why we're excited. We're excited because we're taking tomorrow off, and Friday is we will have a new show for you. It will be pre-recorded, but I am sure you will enjoy that nevertheless. Also, this is a tease to a tease that is coming up. Next week, we are going to be launching I don't even know if I would call it a show. It is going to be a brief audio only, at least for the time being, podcast. Maybe we'll make it available on YouTube.
A new MR experience, maybe?
A new MR experience. Yeah. Well, not an MR experience. You know, the parent company of the Majority Report, of course, is Majority.fm. So Majority.fm will be presenting something in the AM, if you will. It'll be very brief, not meant to give you anything close to the depth that you're used to getting on this program, but it will give you just a little bit of like a little eye-opener for the day. I don't know how else to express it. But I will be doing it part of the time. The other part of the time, we have a co-host who you're not familiar with, I don't think. Someone that we found who's funny, got good politics. And on days when I am with childs, she will be handling most of the work on those things, but it's a quickie little thing. So keep your ears open for it. We're going to just put it in the Majority Report feed, and I guess we'll put it in the membership feed too for that first bit of a while, and then it'll go off on its own. And we will tell you how to give us feedback to it and all this. So we're pretty excited about it around here, because I was like, I don't have enough to do. So now's the time to do more. So there it is. Yesterday, Chuck Schumer had some visitors up in his Brooklyn apartment, and right across from Prospect Park. It was about, about 300 people there, maybe a little more. And this is what happened. Folks calling for the closing of the detention, concentration camps, however you want to refer to them. They're all legit descriptions of these areas that now, and here are some of the pictures. The Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security, not Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, but the Inspector General of the Department of Homeland Security has said, has released pictures and have called the conditions squalor. They have said it's a ticking time bomb. I mean, this is just horrible. Look at that. It's nuts. 88, go backward right there. This is 88 adult males in a cell with a maximum capacity of 41. And let me ask you this. When you think the capacity in a cell is 41, do you think that's roomy or comfortable? This is a cell. 88 adult males. More than double the capacity. Let's see the next picture here. And you have more images of men and women and children in cells. It's just reprehensible. And a reminder: this is a function of Trump's policies. Now, which is not to say there weren't problems under Obama. Folks who followed immigration know that Obama broke records, particularly in the first couple of years of his administration, for deportation. They spent supposedly 5 minutes contemplating the idea of separating families as a policy, as a way of deterring immigrants, and then rejected it immediately. Of course, yes, they separated parents from children when the parents were accused of committing some crime beyond the notion of just crossing the border without documentation. That was a civil offense. If they were found to have drugs, if there was reason to believe they were abusing the children, they were separated as they would be in this country. if you were a U.S. citizen. But it wasn't an ongoing policy. And there was a policy of allowing people to go to families while they await a hearing. And like I said yesterday, somewhere about 80 to 90% of those who are released and then expected to come back for a hearing come back. And I think the rates are even higher when they have an attorney. And they understand what the process is. And as these images come out, and as the Trump's own administration, essentially, elements of it, Department of Homeland Security, an executive agency, Inspector General, part of the executive branch, comes out and says, hey, this is a ticking time bomb. These people are living in squalor. At that point, even the most rabid cheerleaders for this administration are going to have to figure out a plan B. And the plan B is, of course, is to blame the Democrats. Is to pretend like we're doing the best we can. We're doing the best we can.
We wanted to do all the things you're telling us we need to do. You just wouldn't let us.
Here is, and Kilmeade tried to do this. Apparently he can't even stomach it. So they send Ainsley Earhart out there to sort of do the, like, we really do care about this. I'm a mother. I'm a mother. As if you need to be a mother to care about the fact that children are dying, that men are shoved into a cell at double capacity for no reason in the first place.
It's a tough situation. It really is. Yes, we have hearts. We look at this video of people behind the fences and they're sleeping on top of each other. We need more facilities. Democrats and Republicans, as you said over and over, Brian, need to work together because these are human beings. These are God's children.
Pause
we want to
it.
do
Hold
the
on.
best
Before
thing.
we get to God's children, why do we need more facilities? Why do we need more facilities? We don't need more facilities. The children were released to their to family. If everyone who could come in and have a cousin, aunt, uncle, father, mother, son, daughter come in and say, yes, I'll be responsible for them. But of course, the Trump administration has been working overtime for years now to make those people afraid to show up. To make to make these people go underground, even if they're legal. Even if they're here under some type of legal status, documented status. Seen the Trump administration get rid of tens of thousands of people who've been here for years, who were here under the, what was it, TPS? Is that what it's called? The temporary protection status. We've seen it time and time again.
These Democrats and Republicans, as you said over and over, Brian, need to work together because these are human beings. These are God's children. We want to do the best thing. I don't like to hear AOC talk about how people are being made fun of. The women are called names down there. Of course, that is unacceptable and that needs to be fixed. But that's a different issue. Democrats need to work with Republicans so that we can have more money to help these individuals and to come through our country the right way.
How many Republican congresspeople have we seen go down to these detention centers? If we're all God's children and we all care about this and none of us want this problem, how many Republican congresspeople, how many Republican senators have we seen go down there? How many have we heard actually say one critical thing about what's happening there? How many have even done what Ainsley Earhart just did for the first time ever and express a modicum of sympathy? Off the top of my head, I would say it's zero. But they're all God's children. Do Republicans apparently reject the idea that they're God's children? That should be the question reporters should be asking them. It's just, It's unbelievable. And I don't know where the hell Chuck Schumer is. I don't know if he was at his house or not. Is he still in Congress?
Schumer?
Yeah, is he still? I didn't know. I have no idea.
He's focusing on really important stuff.
He's protecting you from robocalls.
Yeah, I mean, all of those. I mean, you might like to terrorize people selling you fake Caribbean vacations, but others of us don't like it, Sam. And Chuck Schumer's looking out for us. You know, Chuck Schumer actually said something to the protesters, which we were remiss in not reporting, is he said, "I agree with you, but I don't hear you." And they were like, "What are you talking about?" We're mobilizing in the streets. Like, until my imaginary friends, the Baileys, come out against the concentration camps, my hands are tied. Until that happens, I'm going to be totally focused on, oh, wait, my legs are sore. Not enough room and coach on the plane. Maybe you should stop distracting me. I'm also working on making sure your coupons stay valid for a longer period of time. A lot of people think they have coupons for baked beans at Key Foods. They go in, they're excited to save 45 cents, and then all of a sudden they're not valid anymore. These are the kind of common sense middle class solutions that I'm focused on. What's that, dear? No more bike lanes? On it.
Unbelievable. It's sad, but it's true. Well, primary, that guy.
I like it. He really does. Whatever way it happens, need to be primary.
Listen, I think he would be a great junior senator from, like, Rhode Island.
He ain't nearly as good as, I'm not saying Sheldon
true.
Whitehouse and Jack Reed are not
okay.
the best senators in the world, but they leave him in the dust. He is bad. And when he's doing big
junior
things,
senator from Virginia, maybe. How's that? Sure.
Yeah.
That would be great.
Although I think Tim Kaine's better on things like the AUMF. But I guess he could take, what's the other guy's
Warner.
spot? Yeah,
Right.
he could take Warner's spot. That's fine. They both awful.
Folks, let me tell you, one of the problems I have with running this business is we have about 4 different legacy systems that we're working on at any given time. I can't even tell you. I honestly, people ask me, what's your membership? And I'm not 100% sure. We don't have a mechanism because we have 2 or 3 different systems that are working. We don't know how to port everybody over and this and that. I haven't figured out a way of consolidating revenue. I understand the concept of having a hodgepodge of systems under a business. This is a problem that keeps many businesses from growing and from just understanding what the hell is going on. They have one system for accounting, another for sales, another for inventory, and so on. It's a big, inefficient mess that takes up way too much time and way too many resources. And as you know, if you're a business person like myself, that hurts the bottom line.
Indeed.
I know it does. I just can't even figure out how it does. I don't even have enough cohesion to figure that out. Well, introducing NetSuite by Oracle. It's the business management software that handles every aspect of your business in an easy-to-grow and easy-to-use cloud platform that gives you the visibility and control you need to grow. With NetSuite, you save time, money, and unneeded headaches by managing sales, finance, and accounting, orders, and human resources instantly right from your desktop or phone. That's why NetSuite is the world's #1 cloud business system. And right now, NetSuite is offering you valuable insights with a free guide, 7 key strategies to grow your profits. You can check it out at netsuite.com/majority. netsuite.com/majority. Download your free guide, 7 key strategies to grow your profits. netsuite.com/majority. That link will be in the podcast description, YouTube description, wherever your descriptions are found. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk to Matt Ford, New Republic staff writer, about the close of the 2019 Supreme Court term. Be right back.
joke, like rubber banded bundles of dope. How many years of success am I living dead? We're doing every second. The least resistance can make it matter. My life is sliding by.
We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. Pleasure to welcome to the program New Republic staff writer, I should say the New Republic staff writer, Matt Ford. Matt, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so Matt, I want to talk to you obviously about the two biggest cases that have come down most recently. Obviously, the census question case and the big gerrymandering case. Before we get to those, I want to sort of work our way into those, but including those two, I guess. Well, let's just talk broadly about this term of the Supreme Court. We've seen, obviously, we have two new members. Obviously, Kavanaugh is the latest, but characterize this term for us.
Well, it was sort of a mixed bag.
You there?
Or as liberals could certainly see. Hello, yes?
Okay, sorry, you dropped out for just a moment. It was a mixed bag. Go ahead.
Well, it was kind of a mixed bag. You know, on some hand, there were cases where liberals can certainly see some victories, maybe more than they expected, especially in the census case, which came as a surprise to some observers. But overall, it reaffirmed that this is a very conservative court. This is a court that is more conservative than the one that Anthony Kennedy took part in for the last 30 years. And more than that, it's a court that's going to probably get more conservative as it goes.
I mean, that's been the trend, it seems to me, right for, aren't we talking like decades now? I'm trying to think if there's been a judge who's been replaced by someone to the left of them. I off the top of my head, I can't remember anyone that we've actually seen something like that in like 30 or 40 years.
That's completely correct. The most remarkable thing about the Supreme Court's modern history is that from 1967 or 68, when Lyndon B. Johnson appointed Thurgood Marshall to the court, and 1993, when Bill Clinton appointed Ruth Bader Ginsburg to the court, the entire stretch of those decades was filled by Republican nominees. And some of those nominees turned out to be moderate. Some of them turned out to be slightly liberal, but many of them turned out to be conservative. So even with that entire stretch, you have the Berger Court and the Rehnquist Court that were certainly more conservative than the Warren Court, which many liberals see as sort of a high point for the Supreme Court. But it's also been sort of a moderate influence as well. Most recently with Sandra Day O'Connor and then with Anthony Kennedy. The court has not yet had 5 solid conservative votes in the cases that come before it. That's where you have this sort of balancing act where, yes, the court moves rightward on many issues, the administrative state, federal powers, things like that. But you also see the status quo, generally speaking, when it comes to abortion rights or affirmative action, and even some advances on LGBT rights. This is going to be a much different era for the court.
So, all right, let's talk about in terms of what you perceive as the most important cases of this term, particularly with an eye to looking forward. I mean, and I guess what sticks out for me, and if you have a different one, you tell me. But Kisor versus Wilkie, because and while that case in and of itself was not necessarily so decisive, there were indications that down the road we are headed into a very, very different era in terms of what a president can do, essentially, I guess, or at least what executive agencies can do going forward. First off, tell me if you think Kisor isn't one of those important cases, and then walk us through it.
Right. I mean, I think I wouldn't place it necessarily as the most important case of the term, but I think you're absolutely right in that it signals what's to come. So Kisor v. Wilkie is an administrative law case, which means it involves how federal agencies carry out their functions and when they step over the line. Now, there's something known as Auer, the AUER, deference in administrative law. It's based off of Supreme Court cases from decades earlier. And the premise of it is it sounds sort of obscure and arcane, but the premise of it is that when courts receive questions about a federal agency's interpretation of its own regulations, if it's ambiguous or questionable, for a variety of reasons, they typically defer to the agency. And for conservatives, many of them criticize that and some similar doctrines as giving too much power to the administrative state, as they call it, too much authority and discretion to federal bureaucracies. Now, in Kisor v. Wilkie, the court had the opportunity to overturn that doctrine, to give that power to review these administrative law cases back to the courts. And they fell short of going all that way. They fell short of overturning the doctrine. Roberts joined with the four liberals to stop that. But at the same time, what we see in the case is that whereas the doctrine before was a very clear, bright line, Kagan, who wrote for the majority, added this sort of new 5-part test. And so there's certainly a retrenchment of conservative judicial power when it comes to how these agency decisions will be viewed in the future.
All right. So, I mean, first off, why does Kagan do that in that instance, right? Because the idea and how does this deal, how does this sort of intersect with the Chevron? I mean, I'm just curious as to get a sense of where if John Roberts is slow walking this, where is he slow walking this to?
Well, I mean, that's the honest answer is that we'll see. Kagan may have taken this approach to secure that fifth vote, to ensure that Roberts would vote with her side and not with the other four conservatives who generally strongly favored overturning the doctrine. Now, Chevron deference, which you mentioned, is also an important one. It's going to come up a lot with regards to environmental law cases. Chevron deference, rather than dealing with ambiguous regulations, deals with ambiguous statutes. So when the EPA determines how, for example, it can enforce the Clean Air Act or other major environmental laws, are courts supposed to defer to the EPA's interpretation of those laws, or are they supposed to interpret those laws themselves? Chevron deference says, well, you defer to the agency as long as it meets certain conditions. This is another area where a lot of federal conservative legal scholars have criticized that doctrine, with sort of the end goal of giving judges more oversight of what the federal bureaucracy can do. And so you can see how, when you have conservative judges and an EPA trying to fight climate change, you run the risk of narrowly interpreting the EPA's ability to do that. Now, for Roberts, if that's the end goal, he left open the door to that in his concurrence, where he said, look, our deference is still intact. Don't assume that this means Chevron will stay intact, too.
And we should be clear here. It's not just a question of giving judges authority over this. It's basically judges negating the ability of these agencies to move forward without more explicit, granular instructions from Congress, which, of course, is creating almost like a fact on the ground that is insurmountable. Right? I mean, let me just characterize this and you tell me if I'm right about this, because my understanding is that if you take, for instance, the Clean Air Act, well, the EPA is given the authority by Congress to regulate anything that's considered to be a toxin in the air. I'm paraphrasing. And
that's right.
And so down the road, the EPA, in what is considered a toxin in the year 2015 is maybe, or what is considered not to be a toxin, or not even people are aware of in 2015, people realize in 2020 because of research that's now a toxin. And the EPA says we're now going to regulate this the courts could say, well, Congress didn't say that you should regulate this, and therefore you don't have the ability to do so. I mean, that's basically the way that would play out if Chevron was undermined.
That's right. And, it's worth noting that this occurs in an environment where Congress is not really capable of passing legislation on those lines. So the practical effects of the EPA losing ground on that could be significant, and there could be no way for Congress to speedily remedy them. But it also speaks to giving conservative judges a more assertive role in that process. Now that the Supreme Court is solidly conservative for, perhaps at least a generation, it gives them a wide variety of options if Chevron falls, to review all manner of federal agency actions that previously they would have abstained from. So in this sense, yeah, Roberts, may be looking at this and indeed playing the long game.
Okay, so you, Wilkie, you did not count as the most important case. What are the a couple of the most important cases that were handled by the court this term?
I would say that first and foremost, the most important case handled by the court this term was Rucho v. Common Cause. That's the one where the court had 5-4 decision, usual partisan lines. The federal courts have no power to review claims of partisan gerrymandering. John Roberts wrote for the majority that this is a power that the judiciary does not have. It's a power that the judiciary is not granted by the Constitution, and it's one that they should not exercise. He pointed to other means to handle this. And as Kagan, this time writing for the dissent, noted, that really puts states, and especially the voters in those states, in a difficult bind because it gives states more opportunities to sort of warp their legislative districts and to allow state legislators to sort of entrench themselves in power.
This is manifested in places like Wisconsin, where you have 54% of the vote goes to Democrats and Republicans win 65% of the seats in the state house, or in North Carolina, where Democrats more or less get 50% of the votes. And again, another dynamic where Republicans get 60 some odd % of the seats. The interesting thing, too, in this case, and I we've talked on this program, hopefully not ad nauseum, but a little bit about the history of gerrymandering. There was a case in the aughts, I believe, where Anthony Kennedy said essentially, like, I'm inclined to rule against partisan gerrymandering if somebody can bring me a mechanism in which we can measure when something is unfairly gerrymandered. And social scientists did that. They came back, 8 years later in another case that Kennedy heard, I guess it was in the last term, and they punted. Basically, I mean, what do you make of that? I mean, was Kennedy basically saying, was there, that to me, that just seems, I mean, I don't have a very high regard for a lot of the members of the Supreme Court, frankly, in terms of their principled stances. But that to me just seems like naked horse trading. Hey, coincidentally, I want my guy who was my clerk to be the nominee. And when we get this big case that I've been waiting for years, basically indicating that all I needed was a mechanism to determine this, social scientists came back with this concept of wasted votes, which is, clearly obvious. Like, democracy shouldn't work where you win the majority of the votes and you lose by a even wider margin the majority of seats. It's clear there's a problem, but he just punted on that, and now we get this case.
It's certainly an odd situation. You're right. It was a 2004 case where he certainly left the door open to ruling this way in the future. The other conservatives had long said, look, I don't think there's a way to do this. But Kennedy, saw the potential damage that this could do, where instead of, voters choosing their legislators choose their voters. And as Wisconsin, North Carolina shows, that can have really corrosive effects on democracy in the states. What Kennedy was thinking when he made the decision, I think we'll find out in 30 years or so when his papers become available. Right. But it's certainly disheartening, and it shows how much this court has sort of drifted away from its role traditionally as supposed to be a guardian of American democracy and not a facilitator of its decline.
Now, there was a 2004 case, Vieth, I think it was, Jubiler, and then there was a case in 2012 where John Roberts had said that he did not see these independent commissions, because basically there's been two responses to this in the states, right? Or I guess maybe multiple ones in states where there is reference to the congressional districts in the state constitution, like Pennsylvania. These things have been overturned, and the state Supreme Court can deal with it. Other states have opted or have had by referendum calls for an independent commission. Roberts in 2012 said that these independent commissions were an inappropriate delegation of the responsibility by the state legislatures in drawing up these maps. But he reversed himself in this latest ruling, didn't he?
I mean, that's right. The 2012 case involved an independent redistricting commission in Arizona. And that was a case where Kennedy joined with the liberals to say, yes, it's constitutional for the state to, address this concern this way. And Roberts wrote and said, look, this is a power that is reserved to legislators. It's not something that can be exercised by an independent body, which made it very strange when we read last week that he says, okay, now these commissions are the right way to handle this problem. And one of the things that Kagan did that was really smart is point out not only that, but that a lot of the solutions to partisan gerrymandering run through the same legislatures that are doing the gerrymandering. She wrote specifically, I believe, that the politicians who benefit from partisan gerrymandering are unlikely to change it. There's a vested interest for them in perpetuating a system that keeps installing them in power, which has its own problems for democracy and how those states function. But it also means that voters have to expend a tremendous amount of energy to overcome these things just to get anything done, let alone any of the time they're supposed to have for organizing for other political interests. Kennedy, I think, was a sort of in a holding pattern trying to find a magic bullet, so to speak, that would allow him to say, okay, here's the clear, bright line for when partisan gerrymandering crosses a line. And, apparently he didn't find the statistical models provided by social scientists to be enough. And this is what we've ended up with today.
So, Matt, when you look at this, like from a legal perspective, what do you see any? Is there a silver lining here? Is there a glimmer of hope? Like I look at this, and it's basically just it's going to be up to. I mean, because and sadly, I will rely on the Democrats' inability to enhance their power when they get elected to places. But I imagine if we want anything that's even remotely close to one person, one vote, because if I'm voting in North Carolina and I win half the districts or half the votes and lose 10 of 13 districts, my vote as a Democrat is worth what, like 7/8, or is it maybe 5/8 of a Republican? What is there any? Down the road, do you see any type of like legal fix to this? Is there any daylight here?
I would like to have some to offer you, but it's very hard to see any sort of glimmers of hope here. I mean, the really troubling thing for me, what really stuck out for me is that we've had a decade now since Republicans and Democrats do this too, but Republicans have done it most zealously and most frequently over the last decade or so. Since 2010, when they began redistricting after the 2010 census and they swept in the wave midterm elections, we've seen these states do this in an aggressive fashion in a way that is blatant. You have lawmakers in North Carolina basically say that the only reason this is a 10-3 split in favor of Republicans is because I couldn't mathematically make an 11-2 split.
Right.
You have them in Wisconsin basically admitting that this is solely to entrench themselves into power as well, in emails back and forth. That's what the situation was like when it was still a possibility that federal courts could stop them. when federal courts were indeed out there forcing states to redraw their legislative maps, forcing them to remedy this problem. In that environment, in that legal environment where partisan gerrymandering was still justiciable, that's the sort of behavior we saw going on. And now that that threat has been removed, now that the only avenue is state Supreme Courts, as we've seen in Pennsylvania, that is, if you want a glimmer of hope, that opinion earlier this year is a promising one. It's likely going to get worse, and it's likely going to get worse in a way that will make it harder to fix down the road.
So it's basically like, we were having a party while the parents were away. We weren't 100% sure when they were coming home from vacation. But now they've just basically said, guess what? We're not coming home. We're not coming home.
Yeah.
The house is yours. And, we have an account at the liquor store, so they'll deliver the kegs, essentially. Is what.
Yep, they handed the deed and the title to the property to them and gave them the keys to the car to go buy more. I mean, it's a grim situation.
Well, I appreciate you following me on that analogy. So let's talk about what other case do you think has been prominent, will have implications in the future? I mean, we've talked a little bit about the censure question case in terms of the ruling. It just seems to me it's rather limited. The Trump. Well, let me just ask you about that before, if there's any other cases, we can bring that up. But I think folks are well aware of the census question and how, subsequent to the argument being presented to the Supreme Court and the Commerce Department saying they did it at behest of the DOJ, who was asking for this question supposedly to enforce the Voting Rights Act, which is laughable in the context of this administration and in the fact that it's never been needed. This information's never been needed in the 50 years or so that we've been enforcing the Voting Rights Act. Subsequent to that, evidence came out that not only was that not the reason, but the guy who did a lot of those 2010 redistricting maps had basically run a model showing that, and putting that question in the census would specifically, and I'm quoting now, help non-white Hispanics and Republicans in their electoral fortunes going forward in a specific district in Texas as evidence. And then he ended up writing some of the excuses for the DOJ to use. There was information of him connecting him to Commerce Department officials. They lied to the Supreme Court, and all the Supreme Court could do was basically, it would have been it would have been shocking, I think, had they not, had they ruled that question could go forward. But they didn't seem to you lied to us. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, didn't that strike you as shocking?
Yes. I will note that if the decision had gone the other way, I would have placed that ahead of the gerrymandering case as the most significant ruling of the term. A lot of people should be breathing a lot of sighs of relief that the Supreme Court ruled against the citizenship question last week, because warping a census, which can only be legally done once every 10 years, and upon which a vast amount of American governance depends, would have been an incredible blow to how this country runs and is operated. But yeah, the cynical interpretation of it is if you think back 1 year earlier to the travel ban, where you have another scenario where Trump is clearly doing something with, at best, racially suspicious motives and more likely genuinely racist motivations. In that case, to exclude people on the basis of their Muslim faith. In this case, to suppress immigrant participation in the census. In Trump v. Hawaii, the court said, look, you've given us enough of a reason to justify this. We don't need to look any further. You've invoked national security. We defer to that. We don't need to think any more about this. It's incredibly impressive that given that ruling, the Trump administration still screwed it up, that they botched the explanation so badly that John Roberts, who wrote Trump v. Hawaii, had to go out and say, look, you guys have, in his politest way possible, lied to us so badly that I can't rule in your favor. Go try again. Now, combined with the deadline, that appears to have been fatal to the citizenship question. But it's really striking that, one, the Trump administration tried that in the first place, and two, that it was so much that Roberts had to go against them on.
Right. I mean, that case, it would have had really a horrible impact on the country over the next 10 years. But I also think it would have gone a long way to basically saying that in the event that the Democrats are in a position of power, we would get real reform with the Supreme Court, because that was just so naked. What also struck me yesterday that I haven't seen anybody comment on was Donald Trump was asked this question at a some type of press conference in I can't remember what the context was, but he came out and said that there's a real problem with immigration. He basically blew it. If they were to come back with another answer, he basically went on television and said, no, the real reason is I got a problem with immigrants. And
I mean, yeah.
He did it again.
This is how the travel ban case should have gone.
Exactly. He did it again, though. He did it again. He went out there and he gave the wrong answer and blew it. And I'm not convinced that's not why they basically gave it up, because the White House lawyers or the Solicitor General must have come in and said, Mr. President, I can't go and argue there's a different reason now, because you just gave up the ghost and said it was because you don't like immigrants.
Yeah. I think that's a perfectly plausible theory for why the Justice Department suddenly gave up yesterday. And I think it really speaks to how on one hand, how much of this country's governance is sort of driven by Trump's, idiosyncrasies. But that also speaks to sort of a deeper problem in the long term, which is what presidents could get away with in theory if they were 10% better at hiding it.
Right.
It's laughable on its face that the Trump administration wanted to add a citizenship question to the census because it was so passionate about enforcing the Voting Rights Act. That stance defies sort of everything we know about this administration, about its approach to voting rights in general, and its general just posture towards minority voting participation in American democracy. So it's just truly impressive that Trump was able to botch this in the way that he did. And I think it really speaks to sort of the problem he has in general with basically running the country. Yeah,
Tom Cotton, in other words, could be looking at this and just go, next time, guys, we're going to get our story straight and we're just going to go in and give a plausible explanation. I mean, I'm quite convinced that had they literally not had an 11th hour indication that this was a total blatant lie that was literally like you could document it, right? I mean, it couldn't have been more explicit. That they would have been, okay, if you really need this for the Voting Rights Act, you got it, guys. I mean, so, all right, lastly, is there anything else that sticks out for you in this past term that is going to resonate going forward? And to the extent that there is or isn't, is there anything that you see, at least in the next term, that is also going to have major implications going forward?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer to that is that, next term is going to give some indications on where this current court falls on LGBT rights. There's cases there involving employment discrimination that are coming before the court, and I think that's going to be really important to watch. Abortion is also, of course, going to be important to watch to see what they do in some cases there, although they haven't taken up a case on that. But in terms of, you mentioned, silver linings and glimmers of optimism earlier, and I think one area that this court has actually genuinely broken some ground there is on criminal justice. We've seen, especially with Gorsuch, but also occasionally with Kavanaugh and some of the other conservatives, a willingness to forge sort of across ideological bounds decisions that positively strengthen Americans' rights in these regards. Earlier this year, the court unanimously held that the excessive fines clause applies against the states. That could be a huge precedent for citizens going forward to challenge civil forfeiture, to challenge a lot of these fines and fees that small towns levy on people for committing minor infractions. That's a very positive development in criminal law. We've even seen Gorsuch team up on multiple occasions with Sonia Sotomayor, on whom he doesn't agree on a wide variety of issues, on cases involving the Fourth and Sixth Amendment, which are both going to be, especially on the Fourth Amendment, which is going to be tested by digital privacy over the next 20 years as technology develops there. There's a lot of things that liberals in particular won't like from the Roberts Court. in the next generation. But I think one area where they can take some comfort is that there seems to be a growing recognition among the justices that sort of past approaches have gone too far, and that the need to defend criminal defense rights is more important than ever.
Matt Ford, New Republic. We'll put a link up to your pieces there. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Bye-bye. There you have it, folks. Just the early stages of the crap show that will be the Supreme Court for decades to come. The real question is, what's Clarence Thomas going to do? My prediction has been that he is going to retire this time next year. But I recently had a casual conversation with someone who has written a book about him and his legal readings, and he doesn't think he's going to, which I was surprised about, but we will be talking to that gentleman when his book is released.
I think I know who that is.
You might. I occasionally run into people on the street. That's basically it. It's basically my social life. I run into people on the street. And then I talk about the exact same thing I would talk about at work.
And then you have them come on your show.
And then I have them come on the show. That's basically it. And then rinse, repeat. But, so I don't know. If Clarence Thomas, you get a Democrat in office for 8 years, I don't even care if it's John Hickenlooper. Well, I do care if it's John Hickenlooper, but I'm so exaggerating for effect. But any of the Democrats who, top Democrats, maybe short of Joe Biden, are going to pick a Supreme Court justice to the left of Clarence Thomas. I mean, it wouldn't be hard. But then maybe you could swing things back a little bit, but we shall see. All right, folks. So again, this is, we'll be back live on Monday. We will have a new show for you on Friday. We will have our new morning offer. We will start to roll it out next week. You won't have to do anything different. We're going to put it in this feed. So you're just going to have to either enjoy it or tolerate it for a certain period of time. But it'll be short enough that you won't, it won't be that hard to just tolerate if you don't want to hear that very useful information. Reminder, it is your support that makes the show possible. And Friday, we're going to have Alex Perrine. We're going to be talking to Alex Perrine, sort of just wrapping up where we are after the first debate, heading into the dog days of summer. Summer's half over already, but my
Jesus Christ.
I mean, not in terms of the solstice and stuff like that. It just started.
Oh, come on, man. God, the solstice.
Nice.
You're supposed to be like the last guy who mentions that.
I like that.
Oh, no,
Well
I'm the
done,
science
Matt.
guy.
Oh, okay.
I'm the science guy here.
I meant scientifically, it's the solstice. Man.
There's like an extra hour a day. I have to put the shades down to play the game if I want to get the proper contrast on my TV.
Gravitational pull.
My gaming room doesn't have windows.
Is that right?
You're living
How's that new TV
You're living the
doing?
dream.
New TV's good. It's the same size as the old TV, so now I just got two same size TVs.
Those are big TVs.
Yeah.
Dude, that TV takes up like half of your living room.
No, I wanted another 10 inches, but it's all right.
Can't you wear
It was like,
a
it
bottle,
like
Coke
encroaches
bottle
on
glasses?
your couch.
Folks, your support makes this show possible. You can become a member by going to jointhemajority.report.com. Jointhemajority.report.com. When you do, for just pennies a day, you support this show. And we say thank you by giving you extra content virtually every day, nearly every day. We also, you can also use the Majority Report app to search all the member content, the archives and whatnot. And you get the show commercial free. What better deal could you ever possibly want? jointhemajorityreport.com. And don't forget, as always, justcoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority. Get 10% off. And our buddy at Just Coffee, Matt, is taking off, headed for greener pastures. Sad to see him go. He was very helpful to the show, particularly in the during the Mike Cernovich situation. But continuing on that relationship with Just Coffee, they've been great over the years, and very, very appreciative of the support they've given this show in a myriad of ways. Not to mention the coffee; it's delicious. Today's Wednesday. Last night was Tuesday. What happened, Michael, in this office?
What happened in this office was
and why wasn't it cleaned? Sorry, go ahead.
Another great TMBS. We talked about anarchism, capitalism, the development of technology, and sort of overcoming technological determinism using Albert Einstein's essay on socialism, which was really fun. Then Anthony Fontano came on. We had a conversation about the history of reggae. We re-reviewed It Was Written. We talked about how he got into politics. And then Malaika Jabali connected us on a sort of a tour from Jackson, Mississippi, New Socialism, Organizing for a Post-Capitalist Future. And we talked about gerrymandering and Joe Biden, a bunch of other things. This weekend, an illicit history of the National Security Council and the rise of the bureaucracy of the military-industrial complex with Daniel Bessner. Patreon.com/TMBS, Michael Brooks Show on YouTube.
Jamie is at Comic Camp, but you can always listen to the Intifada at the patreon.com/the Intifada. And Matt, you are not at Comic Camp.
No, actually, kind of not exactly not in Comic Camp. We're going to be talking about Rutger Bregman's Utopia for Realists, and the discussion we're going to have is sort of, I like to think about it as sort of the liberal reformist left, which I think is going to be represented by my friend Chris, and maybe the more revolutionary, although still sort of democratic socialist left in me. And we're going to talk about things like UBI and open borders and Rutger Bregman's idea that we could solve poverty if we just had the right let the right ideas win, and why they don't win. So look forward to that.
All right, folks. 646-257-3920 is the number for the fun half if you want to participate in the show. In fact, we will see you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous, you're a little bit upset, you're riled up.
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude, you want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
Some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457-2-38-56-27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy!
Dance, dance, dance. Rand Paul. I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way! Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up. Ooh. Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.